and some of the don'ts for eye health generally. And then I promise I'm going to get us back to adult eye exams because I have a lot of questions about that. I can imagine that it's probably not a great idea to be exposed to extremely bright light. And this is why people who weld wear eye shields. But of course, most people are not welding. What other sorts of environmental conditions are detrimental to our vision health across the lifespan, including brightness of light? We talked a little bit about near far. Obviously, we want to keep toxins and acids and solvents and things out of the eye. But what do you see? I'm not going to say hopefully not commonly, but what are some of the things that you feel might not be discussed enough in terms of eye health?
Yeah. I think at all ages, eye safety is something that we don't talk about enough. Our eyes are delicate. The front surface of the eye, the cornea, the clear window that lets the light go into your eye, that's a delicate, very sensitive structure. It's thin, maybe 1 millimeter at the thickest, 0.5 millimeter in the center of our eye. The retina it's neural tissue. This is like really an outgrowth of the brain. This is very sensitive. It's subject to degenerative disease and injury. Our eyes, even if they just get hit, can get very inflamed. Our eyes can be more inflammatory than a bruise on our skin, on our shoulder might be. So eye safety is a big one. And people who are working in certain industries, anyone who's doing any metal grinding, people who are even just gardening, and if you're doing some significant gardening and cutting and you could, fleck a little bit of dirt, and there's a lot of, for example, fungus that lives in the ground, natural stuff. It's all very normal in the earth. But, our eyes aren't really made to absorb that fungus and have a piece of dirt kind of stick in our eye like that. And so people are at risk, I think, for not, and we see too much kind of really unnecessary eye injury, eye trauma, that if people wore either their glasses because they happen to wear prescription glasses or goggles, or for more advanced work, safety goggles, of course. If you're sanding, doing wood shop projects, anything like that, sawing, including, again, in the garden, cutting things. I think eye safety, eye trauma is a big one. And, we probably see 1 or 2 what we call open globes a week come into the emergency room. And, those are tough because, again, the eye's delicate and it can do a lot of healing, but not infinite, right? And so we really, that's one that I think is really an untapped opportunity, is just a little more education around eye protection, protecting against eye trauma.
What about eye cleanliness? There's some pretty dramatic videos also. I've put some of these on my Instagram handle of these are MRIs of people rubbing their eyeballs and people really getting a sense of, first of all, a restatement of what you said, getting a real sense of just how much the eyes are an outgrowth of the brain because of when you see them with the optic nerves in all their beauty and the eyeballs moving around as someone rubs their eyes. I have to imagine that rubbing the eyeballs a little bit isn't bad, but I actually called you. I don't know if you remember, when I was a junior professor, I woke up from a nap one day and I couldn't see out of one eye. I was freaking out. So of course I called you, and I had pressure blinded myself by falling asleep on my hand or something like that. And you assured me that my vision would come back, and indeed it did. So you played dual role of ophthalmologist and psychiatrist. Thank you. And indeed I can see out of both eyes now. But rubbing our eyes, getting gunk in our eyes, I think unless somebody has lost their vision temporarily, it's hard to imagine this is like a big deal. But when it happens, it is truly frightening. We're so dependent on vision. So, what are your recommendations about rubbing or not rubbing eyeballs, about hand washing and cleanliness? And also, how do you wash an eye properly?
Yeah.
Do you use soap and flush it with water, or do you just flush it with water, or should you not even do that? Should you use saline? I realize these might sound like low-level questions, but these are the things that people deal with on an all too frequent basis.
Yeah. For most people, most of the time, actually the eyes are a very good, clean environment. And actually our tears contain enzymes that help break down bacteria and bacterial toxins. And so for most people, regular eye washing doesn't have to be any part of their standard routine. In terms of the surface of the eye, the part of your eye, the conjunctiva, over the whites of the eyes, underneath the eyelids, anything underneath the eyelids, it's pretty self-cleaning. And actually, our tear production and blinking is very good at keeping our eyes clean. The eyelids, eyelashes can be another story. And especially as we age, we can, like our skin is breaking down a little differently than when we were younger. You can develop what we sort of nickname scurf, which is like kind of little dead skin bits that accumulate around the eyelashes. A lot of people develop what we call blepharitis, which is just means inflammation of the eyelashes. Yeah. And for that, doing some eye scrubs is a good idea. They actually sell little pads that you can buy, kind of little that you rip open and you can use to kind of lightly clean the eyelashes. But you can also just use like a No More Tears baby shampoo. Just pump a little bit into the palm of your hand once or twice a day. Let a little, dilute it with a little water and under the sink, and either with your finger or an edge of a washcloth. Just very lightly rub the eyelashes. What I like to do...
with the eyes closed.
With the eyes closed.
Okay.
And don't scrunch them closed too tight, because you're actually burying the eyelashes when you do the roots of the eyelashes when you really scrunch closed. So just gently close your eyes, just, real gentle closure, and then just lightly scrub. It shouldn't be abrasive. You're not trying to exfoliate the eyelids or eyelashes in any way. Just lightly rub with that kind of dilute No More Tears baby shampoo. And that can really help people with their eye comfort. If you feel like you got something in your eye, your ideal eye wash is actually going to be a sterile saline solution, a saltwater solution that, they sell little bottles over the counter, eye wash solutions like that. A lot of people who wear contacts will have that kind of eye wash solution, just a sterile saline eye wash. Just pure salt water. Doesn't have to have any other chemicals or preservatives in it. You can, of course, use...
Not actual seawater or salt water.
Not salt water, thank you. Yeah, not salt water out of your salt pool, not salt water out of the ocean, but like a saline salt water that's available in a sterile. Now, you can also just use artificial teardrops, and some of those come in non-preservative, some of those come in preserved versions. Those are all also completely safe to use in the eye. And there you can, you can sort of spritz into your eye, hold the lid open and give it a little spritz. If you feel like you got something in your eye, a piece of dirt or a lash that's not coming out, just to rinse it. But having like a regular routine, you're not going to hurt anything with the occasional eye rubbing. We all do these things just kind of as a, even a nervous habit, or just absent-mindedly. You might, scratch your arm or rub your eyes or things like that. That's fine. You're not going to hurt anything. There are conditions where people sort of develop kind of almost like a psychological habit. There are certain conditions where people actually do too much eye rubbing. It can be dangerous if you're in that group. But for the regular run-of-the-mill, everyday, occasional eye rubbing, fine. If you get a lash in there and you're trying to rub it and blink it and tear it out. And again, in that situation, you can use some artificial tears, wetting drops, saline drops. Those would be the way to do it.
What an incredible tissue. The way you describe it, the self-cleaning and yet so delicate. A piece of the brain literally lining the back of each of our eyes like a pie crust. I mean, it's a really remarkable biological system. Of course, I don't have to tell you that. It's just it never ceases to amaze me. Let's talk about eye exams in adults. So people are aware, presumably, that there are optometrists and ophthalmologists. I think it's important that we define their different and also overlapping roles. And for those that, are past high school age, probably not getting eye exams unless they're sensing a problem. Perhaps not even with blurry vision or difficulty seeing at a distance, but sometimes just what feels like fatigue of the eyes or a hard time maintaining alignment of the eyes. So how often do you recommend people get eye exams? What is a true regular eye exam? And is it important that people go to an ophthalmologist, or will an optometrist suffice? Typically, optometrists are a little bit easier for most people to access because there's usually one someplace near an eyeglass store. So what are their roles? How often should we get our eyes checked?
Yeah. Optometrists and ophthalmologists do have very overlapping roles in being eye care providers. There are something over 40 or 50,000 optometrists in the United States. There's somewhere around 20,000 ophthalmologists in the United States. Optometrists get an optometry degree. They often have OD after their name. Ophthalmologists usually went to medical school, so they either have an MD after their name or they kind of a DO version of a medical degree. And then optometrists will have done additional clinical training in that area, in their area of eye care provision. Ophthalmologist, MD, doctor ophthalmologist, eye care providers, in addition to that training, will have done surgical training in ophthalmology. Now, there's a lot of overlap, and in both scenarios, you can be getting your sort of general exam taken care of, maybe a screening exam. I think that there's been a traditional differentiation between optometrists and ophthalmologists, with optometrists providing a little more of the primary care, eye screening, maybe managing early disease, common diseases as well, with more advanced disease often sort of upgrading to perhaps specialist ophthalmologists in those areas. But that distinction has been declining over time. It's still true that in, I think, most, if not all states, only the MD ophthalmologists, surgeons can do eye surgeries, but both groups of eye care providers can diagnose, both can prescribe appropriate eye drop treatments, including prescription eye drop treatments for many of our diseases, eye diseases. And in some states, optometrists have successfully lobbied for sort of expanded rights of providing eye care. And again, access to care for the regular person, wherever they may live, is the most important element. And so being able to access eye care, whether it's with an optometrist in your community or an ophthalmologist that may be in your community or maybe at a distance, I think that's the really important thing, is to access care. Now, kind of like we were talking about with kids, if you're in your teens, 20s, maybe even 30s, and not having any problem, you've got no complaints, you can see at distance, you can see it near, so you can read without glasses, you can drive without glasses, you're not having any eye pains, pains around the eyes, redness of the eyes. You may never present to an eye care provider through the first 4 decades of life. And almost all the time, it's going to be okay, right? If you're not symptomatic, the chance you've got some terrible lurking disease in there is low. But we do wish that we had a little more screening going on, because there are some diseases, glaucoma, for example, my specialty. The 2 main risk factors for glaucoma are increasing age, and it usually presents, in most cases actually after age 40, but also increasing eye pressure. And if your eye pressure is too high, you can't feel that. That won't feel funny to you if it sort of slowly has crept up over the years. And so from a screening perspective, it is good to get some kind of screening exam. Could be at a public health fair, could be that you go into the local optometrist, just say, hey, I've never been checked. I'd like to be checked once, make sure everything's good.
Could you ask for, sorry to interrupt, but could somebody say, I'd like my pressures checked? As I recall, at the optometrist, they're going to do a puff test. So they're going to blast some air, get a sense of how rigid or soft, again, using non-clinical, non-technical language here, the eyeball happens to be. Right now, by the way, I'm sure there are several hundreds of thousands of people who are with eyes closed, touching the sides of their eyeballs. And I'm only half joking. Please don't do this, folks, given the conversation we just had about eye cleanliness and eye rubbing. But my understanding is that the truly old-fashioned eye pressure exam was you would close your eyes and the ophthalmologist would gently press to see whether or not your eyes were more rigid than last time. Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah, that's called ballotment, and you can kind of just take 1 second if you're listening and press on your eyes just very lightly. And there's a little give. Of course, the eyelid's part of that give, but it's not like rock hard. And if we press and it feels under the eyelid like, gosh, something under there is rock hard, then we know something is wrong. That is way too high pressure if it's rock hard. But I'll tell you, our ability to differentiate the fine points of eye pressure other than rock hard or not rock hard is pretty limited. So yeah, the optometrist office or the ophthalmologist office, as part of a comprehensive screening exam, they'll check the eye pressure, they'll look at the surface of your eyes, make sure everything's looking healthy there, including the eyelids and lashes, and they'll look inside the eye and be able to screen for these diseases that way too. In addition to checking if you're complaining of any, blurriness at distance or at near. Now, after age 40 or so, a lot of people will present to an eye care provider because we all get what's called presbyopia. And presbyopia just translates to vision of the aged. So, myopia is our word for nearsighted. Hyperopia is farsighted. Actually, emmetropia means normal-sighted, so I can see at distance without any glasses. I'm emmetropic. But then we all get presbyopia. And as we age, the lens inside our eye that's helping focus light onto our retina gets stiffer, such that our eye muscles are no longer able to relax and reshape that lens, and we're not as good as we age at moving our focus from distance vision. Distance vision, by the way, is basically anything 3 feet or further away. You're basically viewing light rays coming from infinity once you're past 3 feet. So 3 feet or further, being able to focus that into 14 inches or 12 inches, which might be a normal, comfortable reading space for you, we lose that ability to flex our lens, relax our lens, refocus our lens from distance to near. And most people around age 40, could be a couple of years before, could be 5 or 10 years later that you notice it, but sort of around that time, you start needing reading glasses. You need a little extra, even if you can see fine at distance and don't need prescription glasses for distance, you need a booster. You need reading glasses for near. I don't know if you're experiencing this yet.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued by this, but maybe you could clarify. When you say reading glasses, do you mean just a magnifier? Because I use a 0.5 or a 0.75 magnifier for reading, but I try and rely on them as little as possible. And I want to get to this about using glasses as a crutch and the problems with that. I have a story about that too. I seem to, it's no coincidence I decided to work on vision. I mean, after all, had a bunch of vision issues that fortunately are corrected. But, I do experience, for instance, when I wake up in the morning, if I look at my phone, which by the way, folks, I try and get outside and see sunlight first before ever looking at the phone. But I'll notice when I first look at my phone in the morning that I can see it very clearly through my right eye, but that if I cover my right eye, my left eye is extremely blurry to the point where I'm like, I'm calling Jeff, I'm afraid. But then over the course of maybe 10, 15 minutes, it resolves. And I don't think it's because something's in my eye. I don't think it's pressure of having slept on that side. I don't think it's a lubrication of the eye issue. But the two eyes seem to come into focus, so to speak, at different rates early in the day. And if I pop my readers on, I can see right away. Mm-hmm. So I will use readers late in the day often, if I want to read at night or something like that. So it feels so much more relaxing. I feel like I can finally relax. Whereas otherwise I realize that I'm straining in order to see. Is there any clinical data in what I just described?
Yeah. Andy, I'll tell you my story that's like that. And we were living down in San Diego when you and I were both professors at UC San Diego. And we had moved into a house, and I found a pair of reading glasses in a closet. And, we asked around, did any of the grandparents leave some glasses behind? Nobody seemed to know who they were. So we finally just decided, I guess the people who moved out of the house just left a pair of glasses, in the back of this closet. And then I tried the glasses on, and I looked at my phone up close and was just like, oh my God, wait a second. I didn't realize how blurry my near vision was. And this is back, I was about 40, 42, something like that. So I didn't even realize until I put on the readers. And these were, 1.25 magnifiers, so
not
also
huge,
mild
but
ones.
Fairly mild
ones.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, I got addicted because who doesn't like good vision?
Right.
Right? I mean, oh my God, now I can make the type smaller on my phone. I can, it was wonderful.
And you can relax a bit. I mean, the musculature that's responsible for moving the lens and focusing the eye, and then all this extraocular musculature. I mean, we forget. I mean, I'm definitely going crow's feet around my eyes, probably because I squint or something. But just the ability to relax one's face, it just feels like more energy. I feel like can be devoted to what we're actually looking at. I'm not making light of this.
Well, pretty soon I just kept that one pair of glasses with me all the time, and I would just keep them in a pocket and whip them out whenever I was, working at near using my phone. At a little greater distance, like a typical computer distance, I could still see the computer fine. So it really started for like kind of that close-up phone. It was I could get into here, but not all the way into here. And and then pretty soon I was just totally addicted. And so, then I had to go buy 10 pairs and leave them, one by the bedside table, one in the car, one in the computer bag, one on every desk I work at. Yeah, because I'd leave them anywhere and forget them.
You're
and
a
that way I could just,
all.
exactly, So, So whether using the readers accelerates the progression of dependence on the readers is still not, that's still up for debate. Some studies say maybe yes, some studies say maybe no. But certainly psychologically, we get addicted to good, easy vision. And if you don't have to squint and if you're not straining your muscles and all of a sudden the text on your phone looks crisper again, boy, that's addictive. You're going to like good vision. And so it feels like you're getting dependent. And how much of that is change in the eye muscles and how much of that is just the psychology of wanting to have good vision, I think probably the jury's a little bit out on that point. But point being, either way, your dependence will grow. And as you continue to age, 40s, 50s, up until about 60, 65, the ability to shape that lens gets weaker and weaker and weaker. And so you need to move from the 0.5s to the 1.0s to the 1.5s. And
to the Coke bottle.
Well, thankfully not. You eventually max out at about plus 2.5 or plus 3, because that's the amount of extra refractive power that you need in magnifiers to take the equivalent of your infinity viewing and bring it up to 14 inches to read it near, basically. You need a plus 3, and then you don't need any lens eye muscle action whatsoever. So you kind of max out around 2.5s or 3s. So because most people will hit this somewhere in their 40s, this sort of like, gosh, I'm having trouble on the phone. I think most people actually use that. That's like kind of the first time for a lot of people. They're like, well, I guess I should go to the eye office, right? See the optometrist or maybe ophthalmologist. And when they go in, they should be getting the standard in either of those offices will be to give you a full screening exam, including maybe it's the puff test or a blue light test or a little pen that can check your eye pressure, and having a look inside and seeing if your retina and optic nerve look healthy. It's kind of screening for all the main diseases. And they'll tell you at that point, hey, you look great. If you feel like your glasses aren't doing it for you in a year or 3 years, come back. Or they might say, hey, I've detected something. I'm worried about you. And they'll set up a routine for your ongoing eye care.
Assuming that somebody doesn't have